In this video, I want to look at the difference between deficit and debt. If the government brings in tax revenues of $1 million and they spend exactly $1 million on their expenditures or their government outlays, then obviously the two are going to be equal and the budget is going to be balanced. If the revenues that they bring in are larger than what they spend money on in the year, then they have a surplus. And if the revenue that they bring in is less than what they spend money on, they have a deficit. So if we were to add up all deficits offset by any previous surpluses, that would be our national debt. So for example, in year one, if our government goes in debt $105 billion, or I'm sorry, if they have a $105 billion deficit in year one, and then in year two, they have a $100 billion deficit, and then in year three, they have a $50 billion surplus, the nation's total debt would be adding up the deficit and taking away the surplus. So this nation's debt would be $155 billion. Okay, so obviously to get out of debt, you have to run a surplus, a budget surplus, and it would have to be years of budget surpluses to offset the massive debt that we are in as the United States. I want to show you guys a really great website where you can find a lot of data, and this is usdebtclock.org, and most of this data comes from the U.S. Census, the U.S. Treasury, or the Congressional Office, the Congressional Budget Office. So the data is really good, and you can even get it on your iPhone now. But let's go ahead and look at this. A couple of the really big things on here. Right over here in this corner right here on the upper left-hand side, this is our national debt. Our national debt is almost $18.3 trillion. And you want to compare the national debt to the U.S. gross product right here, gross domestic product right here of $17.8 trillion. So we see that we actually owe more than we're producing. Our debt to GDP ratio, I'm directly below that now. Our debt to GDP ratio is 102%, almost 103%, 102.7%. And if you hover on any of these things, it'll tell you, where the source is. So the source, so that I'm just hovering on the gross domestic product. And if you look up here at the top where it says US debt clock, that changes as you hover on anything. So hovering over US gross domestic product, it tells us what gross domestic product is. It's a basic measure of the market value of all final goods and services made within the borders of the United States within a year. And then it's a real-time tool, and it'll tell us that the source is from the Congressional Budget Office. So there's a lot of really great economic data on here that you really should spend some time going over. I'm going to point out some things that you definitely have heard multiple times throughout the semester, and some things that we can use to compare and contrast where the economy is with where it's been. So over here, if you come down to the monetary base, and you go into the next one, here's the M2 money supply. We spend a lot of time talking about the supply of money. Here's the M2 money supply, and it tells us right now the M2 supply of money is roughly $12 trillion. It tells us what our trade deficit is down here, how much of our debt is held by foreign nations. Something that I want you guys to look at really fast is over here on the far right-hand side of your screen. If you see right here where I'm hovering, this is the median income right now, okay? So here's my little cursor, median income now. 50% of American wage earners had net compensation less than or equal to the median wage. So this is the median wage right now. We're going to compare that to the median wage in 2000. So this is 2000, this is current, 2015. This is 15 years ago. Now really fast, I want to take us over to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we're going to look at, in 2000, the median wage was $28,492, okay? In today's economy, you would need almost $40,000 to be just as comfortable as you were in 2000 with the same income. Okay, so that means the purchasing power of the income that individuals made in 2000 should have gone up to almost $40,000. Okay, however, we see that it's only gone up not even $400. Okay, so this gives us a really good state of the fact that we've had inflation and the median income has not increased to keep pace with inflation. The median new home price is under $300,000. In 2000, that's a huge jump. 173,000 down to up to 291,000 as the median home price have been increasing. We have the number of prison inmates. We have 2.3 million prison inmates right now. We have almost 600,000 foreclosures, almost a million bankruptcies happening in the United States. We have 6.6 million convicted felons. There are approximately 50.5 million public school students, while there are only 3.3 million charter students. Our retirees, there are almost 50 million retirees in the United States. The number of people living in poverty is almost 44 million people living at or below the poverty line. There's so much great information on here that you really need to spend a lot of time going over it. Another thing that will definitely come in handy is if you use this tool up here, the US debt clock machine, the time machine. I'm up here in the right hand corner. If we click on it, we can go back to 2000 or even back to 1980 and look at, they didn't have as much information for the 1980 results, but we can see that our gross domestic product in 1980 was $2.5 trillion. Okay, our national debt wasn't even $1 trillion. If we go back to 2000, we can see that here's our budget surplus. This is the green right here where we were running a US federal budget surplus. We still had a debt of almost $5.7 trillion. However, we were running a budget surplus that was paying down that debt. This last year is the budget showdown. Sometimes, yeah, I was going to say it should be for 2019. The budget showdown for 2019. So basically, this looks at 4 different estimates. The Congressional Budget Office's estimates for where we'll be in 2019. The Office of Management and Budget, where they suspect we'll be. The House Committee on the Budget, where they expect us to be, and then the U.S. debt clock at current rates. So if we just keep trucking along exactly where we are, they project that our national debt will be $20 trillion, where the House Committee projects that it'll be only 19.4, and both the Congressional Budget Office and the Office of Management and Budget both think that it'll be over 21 trillion. Okay, so again, lots of really great data on this website. You can use this for all sorts of classes, poli-sci classes, and obviously your econ classes. Okay, so check this out and spend some time going over all the different facets of this until you really understand what's going on with the state of our national debt. And in case you don't know, the way that a debt clock works, let's say that I owe you $1,000 and you want to give me a little clock to show me that we've agreed that at the end of the year, I'm borrowing this money on January 1st, and the end of the year, I will owe you $365 in interest. So on January 1, the $1,000 that I borrowed plus $1 of interest shows up on the clock. On January 2, the $1,000 I borrowed plus $2 of interest shows up on the clock, and it will keep updating. So it is a projection of how much I'm going to owe you at the end of the year, and this is a real-time estimate. So a lot of times you can be watching it and you'll see huge jumps where different outlays have been paid, or we had to make a big payment on the debt. And that's another thing, is looking at interest on the debt. the amount of interest on the debt, this line right here, interest on the debt, is money that it's costing us to be in debt. Okay, go ahead and play around with this site and make sure that you scroll down because not everything can fit on your screen unless you make it pretty small. There's a lot more really great information down here about the gold supply and demand and also gold and precious metals if you have any interest in that. And if anybody's in the market for a home, always going over mortgage and loan calculators is a great thing. All right, next we will be going over monetary policy. So this stuff is very relevant.